Chapter 16, the urinary system. Excretion is the term given to the elimination of waste and excess substances from the body. These substances include metabolic waste such as carbon dioxide, heat, salts, water, and nitrogen-containing bases such as ammonia, urea, and uric acid, as well as creatine. Several organs throughout the body eliminate these waste and excess essential ions. From the lungs, elimination of heat, water, and carbon dioxide. From the skin, the integumentary system, heat, water, bicarbonate ions, salts, urea, and uric acid. Organs of the gastrointestinal tract removes solid waste and some metabolic waste. From the kidneys, urine is formed, which is a mixture of water and solutes, such as water, bicarbonate ions, inorganic salts, hydrogen ions, urea, uric acid, and creatine. The plasma proteins, of course, found in blood to help maintain that water balance, to keep water from being drawn from the bloodstream into the cell. The plasma proteins always remain within the blood. Ammonia is formed in the liver during degradation or breakdown of amino acid. Within the liver, it converts it to urea, which is a less harmful waste. So eating large amounts of protein results in the production of large amounts of ammonia. Uric acid is formed during the recycling of nitrogen-containing bases of nucleotides. In excess, these may form crystals in the synovial joints, causing gout. Typically, the area is the large toe, where people complain about gout. Creatinine is generated in skeletal muscle from the breakdown of creatine phosphate, which is an alternative energy source for muscle contraction. And so this image shows what we just spoke about from the integumentary system, the skin, the bicarbonate ions, excess heat, water, urea, the uric acid formed from the breakdown of nucleotides, respiratory system, oxygen is obtained, carbon dioxide is released, as well as any excess water, moisture, or heat. Food eliminates the feces from the gastrointestinal tract, and urinary system, elimination of nitrogen-containing waste such as ammonia, urea, uric acid, salts, and excess ions the body does not need. The functions of the urinary system is to regulate the volume, the pH, the pressure, and the composition of blood. The kidneys filter waste and excess materials from the blood. Healthy kidneys filter blood more than 30 times a day. It assists the respiratory system in maintaining the blood pH, through either reabsorption of hydrogen ions or bicarbonate ions to regulate that pH. It also maintains the fluid balance by regulating the volume and composition of both the blood and urine. The kidneys regulate the water and dissolved substances that are going to either be removed from or returned to the blood depending on the monitoring and the need. Substances that are not returned to the blood are released as urine. The organs of the urinary system include the ureters, which are going to transport the urine from the kidneys to the bladder. The urinary bladder, of course, stores the urine. The urethra is going to transport urine from the urinary bladder to outside the body. Peristaltic contractions are going to move this through these ureters, going to leave the kidney kind of at an indented space called the hilum. This is where the blood vessels enter and exit the kidney. Of course, in the urethra in females only transport urine, whereas the urethra in males transport both urine and sperm. And so this shows the location and some of the essential functions of the organ systems of the urinary system that we will be talking about, as well as the location. They're kind of high up in the abdominal cavity. The kidney basically has, structure of the kidney has three regions: the renal cortex, renal medulla, and the renal pelvis. The outermost area anchors the kidney to the abdominal wall and surrounding tissues. The second layer is the middle connective tissue. It's also known as the adipose capsule, which adds that protective cushion of fat to protect the kidney. The innermost layer has collagen fibers that act to also protect the kidney from trauma. And you see the adrenal gland that we discussed about in chapter 10 that releases hormones that it sits on top of the kidneys. And the hilum is where you see the renal artery and the renal vein go in. It's kind of the indented section there. And the ureter is located roughly right behind it. That's what's going to take the urine produced from the kidneys to the urinary bladder to be stored. The renal cortex begins at the outer border and extends inward between the pyramid-shaped subdivisions of the renal pyramids of the renal medulla. The renal medulla, the narrow end of each renal pyramid, joins a cup-like extension of the renal pelvis, and the renal pelvis is the chambers through which urine drains into the ureter. This just shows an image of a nephron, which is the functional unit of kidneys. Each kidney contains as many as 2 million nephrons. Nephrons are the microscopic units of the kidneys, considered the functional unit of the kidney, responsible for the formation of urine. And each nephron consists of a renal corpuscle and a renal tubule. The renal corpuscles fluid is filtered from the blood. In the renal tubule, substances are either removed from or added to the filtrate. In the renal corpuscle, this is the site of filtration and consists of the glomerulus, which is a tuft of capillaries, and the glomerular capsule, are also known as the Bowman's capsule, which surrounds the glomerulus. Blood is going to enter through the afferent arteriole. Water and small solutes are going to move into the glomerular capsule, which then are going to move into the renal tubule. Once it moves into the renal tubule, it's considered filtrate, and filtrate is similar to blood plasma, but it of course lacks proteins. Blood leaves the glomerulus by efferent arterioles. The renal tubule is the site of reabsorption and secretion and consists of three sections: the proximal convoluted tubule, the loop of the nephron, are also known as the loop of Henle, and the distal convoluted tube. The name of the tubule represents its location nearest to the glomerular capsule, so the proximal convoluted tubule would be coming off the glomerular capsule, followed by the loop of the nephron, then the distal convoluted tubule. The proximal convoluted tubule contain numerous microvilli, which reabsorb useful substances from the filtrate that are eventually returned to the blood. Again, microvilli in the proximal convoluted tubule, just like in the small intestine, increase the surface area for reabsorption. The loop of the Henle have few cells, and they have no microvilli. They have both an ascending and a descending limb. The distal convoluted tubule, the tubule of many nephrons empty into a single collecting duct that's going to drain into the renal pelvis. The renal pelvis is connected to the ureter, and the ureter is going to carry the urine to the urinary bladder. This again just shows these nephrons beginning in the renal cortex and dipping down into the renal medulla. Approximately 80% of the nephrons are confined to the cortex, the renal cortex, and dip only slightly into the medulla. The remaining 20% have long loops that extend into the renal medulla, and once in the medulla they abruptly turn back into the renal cortex, where they lead to the distal convoluted tubules. The nephrons that extend deep into the medulla play an important role in water conservation. And so this just shows the image of the nephron, and you see up at the top left the glomerulus, which is the capillaries. This is where the filtration is going to occur, surrounded by the glomerular capsule. You have that afferent incoming arteriole. That's where the blood is first going to come in to be filtered. It will follow from the glomerular capsule to the proximal convoluted tube. Again, it's named by the location nearest to the glomerular capsule. Following there, it'll go into the loop of Henle, have very few cells, no microvilli. From there, lead into the distal convoluted tubule, which is going to lead to the collecting duct. You can see kind of sections coming off of that collecting duct. Those would be other nephrons, so several nephrons empty into the same collecting duct. This just shows the renal corpuscle, kind of a closer in view of what we looked at earlier, where the glomerular capsule is, and the renal tubule, where some of those nephrons dip way down into. The nephrons perform primarily three functions: glomerular filtration, which is going to occur in the glomerulus capsule, tubular reabsorption, and tubular secretion. So the functions are going to be that it's going to remove substances from the blood that's going to be small enough to fit through the pores of the kidney filter. It's going to return the useful substances our body wants, our body needs, and it's going to remove waste or excess materials from blood to filtrate, which will eventually be excreted. Kidneys also remove substances such as drugs that do not naturally occur in the body. Thus, that's why they do urine tests to check for drugs. Glomerular filtration occurs as blood pressure forces these water and ions and other small molecules from the blood in the glomerulus to the space inside the glomerular capsule. The concentration of the filtrate within the glomerular capsule is close to that of blood plasma, although it lacks proteins. Plasma proteins are always going to remain within the blood. This shows a closer imagery of a glomerulus, in that you can see the afferent, the incoming arteriole. This is where the pathway of the blood is first coming in. You can see the movement of water and solutes is being pushed out to be maintained by the body, and the efferent, the outgoing arteriole. So this tuft of capillaries and then from the glomerulus you can see it leading to the proximal convoluted tubule. There's single layers of epithelial cells which have pores that allow some substances to move out of the capillaries. So it's filtering it within this area. This just shows another image where because of these epithelial cells, the single layer, that some solutes can move through these pores of the glomerular capsules and remain in the filtrate. Tubular reabsorption is going to remove the useful materials from the filtrate as it passes through the convoluted tubule. So everything that occurs through the glomerular capsule is a filtration process. Now we're moving to tubular reabsorption. So the first call after the glomerular capsule is substances that were not filtered out there will be reabsorbed as it passes first through the proximal convoluted tubule. About 99% of the filtrate is going to be returned to the blood. In other words, we're typically going to reabsorb 99% into the bloodstream to maintain for our own usage. Reabsorbed substances include water, essential ions, and glucose. Malfunctioning in the proximal convoluted tubule would result in glucose presence in the urine, because as it moves through the proximal convoluted tubule, it's going to maintain 100% of the glucose, approximately 99% of the water, sodium approximately 99%, 100% of bicarbonate ions, approximately 93%. So it's an important area of reabsorption, and the body's just not going to let go of glucose. If there's glucose in the urine, there is a disorder that needs to be seen by a doctor and corrected, such as diabetes would be one indication possibly. And so this just shows the imagery of the microvilli and why this increases again, as in any area of the body, such as we spoke about in the small intestine. It increases the surface area for reabsorption, these microvilli. The kidneys, approximately 48 gallons of filtrate that enter the glomerular capsule each day. Approximately 47 gallons of that are returned. Tubular secretion occurs also along the proximal and distal convoluted tubules, as well as the collecting ducts. It removes any waste or excess ions from the blood that are eventually going to be eliminated in the urine. It removes substances from the blood not naturally found in the body, such as penicillin, cocaine, marijuana. Again, this just shows where the purified blood is going to exit the capillaries surrounding the nephron into the venules, eventually going to join the renal vein. Urine is going to empty from the distal convoluted tubules into collecting ducts, and from the collecting ducts, urine is going to move to the renal pelvis, leave the kidney through the ureter to be stored in the urinary bladder. So we've got glomerular filtration we talked about going on in the glomerular capsule, so filtration's occurring there. It's going to remove substances that can fit through those epithelia, single layer of epithelial cells, to the inside of the glomerular filtrate that's going to be returned to the blood. Tubular reabsorption. This is the area where glucose is going to be reabsorbed, 100% of glucose in the proximal convoluted tubule, ions, potassium, sodium, and then tubular secretion, the excess, you see the drugs up at the top, any excess hydrogen ions did we have any type of excess ions would be secreted in the tubular secretion. Kidneys help regulate blood pH in two ways: by returning bicarbonate ions to the blood during tubular reabsorption, or either by removing excess hydrogen ions through the blood through tubular secretion. Of course, the pH is also maintained through the respiratory and buffer systems in blood as well. As we spoke earlier, the nephrons with the long loops, the 20% that have the long loops that extend into the renal medulla, are responsible for conserving water. This maintenance of a high solute concentration in the interstitial fluid within the renal medulla is key. It leads to water moving out of the collecting ducts for conservation by the body and production of concentrated urine. Kidneys facilitate water conservation by producing concentrated urine. Thus, kidneys participate in regulating both cardiac output and blood pressure. The most important solute is sodium chloride and urea, because where sodium goes, water is going to follow. In the descending loop of the nephron, or the loop of Henle, solute concentration of filtrate increases as water leaves, and you can see water is going back into the filtrate. Ascending limb of the loop, the solute concentration decreases as sodium chloride leaves. Water cannot follow because this action as this tubule is not permeable to it. So along that region, water cannot follow. But going up, you see sodium chloride. And why I say sodium chloride, because sodium is a positive ion and chloride is a negative ion. So this electronegativity, once one goes, it's going to automatically make the other. But where sodium and chloride go in the regions of the tubular system of the nephron, water is going to follow as well. And in the collecting duct, the antidiuretic hormone that we spoke about in chapter 10 causes the collecting duct to become permeable to water. Water leaves the filtrate due to the high sodium chloride and urea in the medulla, and this results in concentrated urine and the conservation of water. So this is the region of the collecting duct in which the antidiuretic hormone aids in maintaining water conservation.